Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Dell Disability Lawyers, here with attorney Stephen Jessup, and today we're going to have the opportunity to talk to you about a New York Life disability insurance denial claim. And Stephen, the facts of this case are upsetting because it's cases that we see often with MS, especially when it's a school teacher who, the cases are even more upsetting just in general when it's someone who's a lower wage earner than a high-level executive or a doctor or an attorney or something like that, because that person with the accumulations of savings over their life doesn't have enough money set aside to financially survive a denial. So we understand, not to minimize someone who has more money, but the stakes and the timeliness are so much more, are just so much higher, because we know there's not a lot of savings there and you're draining into personal savings, sometimes retirement funds and things like that. So in these videos, we talk about success stories we've had. This is one that you just had recently, and I want to talk about the background of it, what you were able to do for the person, and how you're going to protect our client in the future so that her benefits don't get denied again.
Yeah, so our client, like you said, and this was a school teacher. She was an elementary school teacher. She actually has her PhD. That's how passionate she is about teaching. Teaching for quite some time, been struggling and fighting with multiple sclerosis. Got to the point where the stress associated with the job was causing additional flare-ups and deterioration in her condition, so she filed for disability. During the initial review of the short-term disability claim, New York Life looked at it as not a neurological issue, a multiple sclerosis issue, but purely as a mental health condition. They're trying to just say, oh, you're depressed, you have anxiety, this and that. They weren't looking at the MS. And they ultimately ended up denying her claim, and that's when she contacted us. And even in denying her claim, they had a neuropsychologist review it, a behavioral health case manager, and a psychologist, not even a neurologist, even though when she filled out her paperwork, she was claiming multiple sclerosis is what took her out on disability. But New York Life, unfortunately, just wasn't having any of it and denied her claim.
And did they ever pay her?
No, no.
Okay. And why was a neurologist important to review this file? Why do you think New York Life should have had a neurologist?
Well, that's the specialist who knows what's going on with the standpoint of her MS and what's happening there. Yes, she has secondary depression and anxiety, so yes, a mental health provider or reviewer, but that's not the impetus. They weren't going to find enough there to establish that, oh, depression and anxiety is keeping her from working, as opposed to looking at the global symptoms and issues she's having in relation to the MS.
So this was initially a short-term disability appeal denial, and she has long-term disability as well with New York Life, correct? So you took an interesting strategy on this particular one. Tell us about what you did.
Well, we filed the appeal for the short-term disability. Prior to, or I wouldn't even say as part of her claim, she had had a preliminary, I wouldn't even call it neuropsychological testing. It's a test you can take. It's very quick and just kind of can be a baseline documentation of issues. New York Life took big issues saying, oh, it doesn't indicate that there's any problems here, this and that. Totally missing the point of what the testing is. It's not meant to establish certain restrictions and limitations. So in doing her appeal, we did have her undergo neuropsychological testing to document where she's having issues. And that came back clear. The doctor who did the examination, reviewed all the information, said, she does have mild neurocognitive disorder. And sometimes people say, oh, mild. Well, there's only two types, mild and major is usually Alzheimer's, dementia, really severe. So anything that's mild is bad when it comes to a neurocognitive disorder. So the testing came back that she was disabled, or that she had limitations on memory and all these other issues, especially as someone who is carrying a PhD. So we submitted the appeal with additional support from her doctors. New York Life Short-Term Disability Department, nothing was moving them. They had blinders on that this was a mental health issue and there was nothing to support restrictions and limitations. But then they took an interesting turn during the appeal review, in that because she didn't get us involved as soon as she was denied, it was sometime later. They tried to argue that the testing that we had performed wasn't contemporaneous to the time of the denial and therefore not valid. Like, you can't, it's not time contemporaneous. The problem is you can't, in present time, create information in the past. So the short-term disability department was just denied. So as soon as we got the denial letter, I called her same day and I said, we're filing for your long-term. Her immediate thought was, well, what's the point? If short-term denies, why long-term? I'm like, well, this is New York Life. This is something I prepared her for, that I don't know why with them more than any other carrier, but to the point that I have a basic form letter to send back to the short-term disability department once we get to that. But we file for the long-term because I told her in the past I've had it where I can get the long-term approved, which isn't logically, doesn't make sense in that short-term disability is the elimination period for long-term, so usually one's predicated on the other. So we did file the claim for long-term disability, and just in the past week got notification from long-term department that they were approving her claim. So then, like I said, I have a form letter. I put all her information and sent it to the short-term disability analyst saying, hey, long-term disability is predicated on being disabled during the elimination period, which is the short-term disability period. Essentially pay up or we're going to file a lawsuit. So we're expecting to get the approval on that soon if history proves correct and where it's happened on a bunch of other clients.
So the long-term division, same company, right?
Same company.
Same people who reviewed the claim?
No, so it's your long-term. And I always kind of tell people sometimes short-term's the minor leagues,
right,
and the more experienced people are in the long-term. And New York Life especially, and even when it was Cigna, sometimes someone who might be watching this, maybe it was a Cigna that converted to New York Life, separate issues they may have with it, but it's still the same employees, if you will. But the long term, I don't understand why they can look at it and go, oh yeah, we see why there's an issue here, but for short term, that doesn't seem to ever come up to them.
And so even though you did your appeal on the short term, is it like a second appeal you're doing, or are you just giving them like a do the right thing kind of opportunity before you sue them?
No, this is a do the right thing or we're going to sue you, type of situation.
And do you deal directly with the person who did the appeal, or do you deal with their legal department?
I go to the appellate person first. That's usually your cleanest, directest line to it. So I've always historically just gone back to the appeals department.
Okay, so but that was probably, the short term really is, not a lot of money because it's 90 days worth of...
Yeah, it wasn't, it's a small period of time, in consideration.
But it was amazing that you were able to get the long-term approved, because a lot of people think, oh, how am I going to get to long-term if short-term wasn't approved? And the message to take away from this for people are like, sometimes don't worry about the short-term, we can deal with that later, and it's kind of just like peanuts compared to what the big prize is, which is the long term.
And we also know that if we were to say they denied the short term and we try to file a lawsuit immediately and argue, oh, well, if they denied this, long term is going to be denied, so you can try to sue for long term. And some courts will say, no, it was never an analysis done. So if you're going to end up in court, you want to be able to sue for everything as well. So it's always worth pursuing. And I think this is also a important, lesson and message to take away. Don't stop fighting. Continue to push the issue and fight. I mean, everything was on her side from a medical basis to show that she had these issues. And it just took someone down in New York Life short-term disability department to say no, 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 and then appeals there towed the line. And I think one of the things that you have to take into consideration here, like a lot of policies, the short-term disability is funded through the employer. And it's only administered by New York Life. So New York Life is just directing the employer to pay. It's not their money. But when it goes to long-term disability, it's their money. So that's why a lot of times in that transition you can see a denial. But I think when it happens, when they deny and fight so hard in the short term, they're trying to avoid getting to long-term disability where they're going to be spending their own money.
Now, you had mentioned that right out of the box this was an MS claim. But it seemed like New York Life was trying to push to say, well, it might be an MS claim, but we think it's a mental nervous claim, meaning we think you're suffering from anxiety or depression. On your long-term disability approval, are they trying to go that route as well, or are they accepting the MS as a physical?
They're accepting the multiple sclerosis.
Okay. And we do see them often, like they did, try to push for the mental nervous condition because they can limit benefits to either 12 or 24 months in the policy.
Yeah,
so.
And even if they do that, and we've seen that happen, just as an aside, if they do that, that doesn't mean all of a sudden you're precluded from continuing to argue your physical medical evidence. As we always say, if it's 24 months, you have 24 months to continue to build information and fight that issue.
So how are you going to present this claim to continue to build up and support the physical aspects of the claim in relationship to the anxiety, depression symptoms, and cognitive limitations?
Well, I think one of the big things, the cognitive, we know from the testing that it's not related to any mental health process. It's only related to a neurological, the way that it was scored. So we have that firmly there. Her doctors have been incredibly supportive. So now I think it's just continuing to build upon that support. One other thing that's probably in their mindset is they're aware that she's relatively far along in the Social Security process. So if that is approved, you know, they know they're going to get their reduction in their obligations. And like you said, as a public, you know, school elementary teacher, it's not like they're paying her a very significant benefit amount, even though she's young. So if they're looking at the long game of, all right, well, this may not, you know, be something worth throwing a lot of money to fight, let's see what happens, especially with the Social Security, because they, you know, as soon as you get an approval, first thing is more claim forms and what's the status of your Social Security,
Right.
which is what we're dealing with now.
And I know from now and for the foreseeable future, while she remains unable to go to work, that you'll be helping her with the New York Life claim forms, the New York Life attending physician statement forms, any times they want to call and talk to the claimant, talking to her doctors, reviewing her medical records, all of those things to do whatever it takes to keep her benefits from being denied again.
Yep.
So congratulations, and I hope you hear a favorable outcome shortly here on the short term also. If you are someone out there who's been denied long-term or short-term disability benefits by New York Life, we're able to represent you anywhere in the country, and we always provide you with an initial free phone consultation. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the Managing Attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now, at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now, we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.